We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Zayin Amud Aleph in Mesechet Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 57a. On the previous summer, there was a machlokas amoraim between Rabba and Rav Yosef in terms of a shomer aveda. If somebody's watching over a lost object, what kind of shomer is he? According to Rabba, he's a shomer chinam. According to Rav Yosef, he's a shomer sacher. And Rav Yosef asks Rabba the following question. It says in the Braisa, it says in the Tosefta, Hechzira l'makom shi'irena. Let's say the person returns the lost object to a place where the owner is able to see it. Eino chayav l'tafel, but the person doesn't need to deal with it any longer. That's enough. That's considered a chazara. It's considered returning it. Nignava o avda chayav b'achrayus, and if it's stolen or it's lost, so then the person is chayav. The person is responsible for that. And so the Gemara now says, "My nignava o avda." What does it mean that if it's stolen or lost, this person is responsible? Lav nignava mi beiso v'avda mi beiso doesn't mean that if it's stolen from his house, if it's lost from his house, a shomer sacher is the one who's chayiv in geneva v'aveda. That shows that the person who's watching over the lost object has the status of a shomer sacher. That's why he's responsible for geneva v'aveda. Isn't that the interpretation of this brisa? And the Gemara says, "Lo, no, mimakom shechzira." Maybe what it means is that if it is stolen or it's lost from the place where he returns it to, so then he's chayiv. But the Gemara says that explanation doesn't make any sense. V'alkatani eino chayiv l'tafilba. But it says in the beginning of the brisa, once he brings it back to a place where the original owner can see it, he's not responsible anymore. That's what it means. Eino chayiv l'tafilba. So what do you mean if it's stolen or lost? Suddenly he's responsible. And the Gemara says, Amar Lei said back to him, Hacha b'mayaskinan. Here, what is the brisa dealing with? Kagon shechizira b'tzarayim. It's talking about when you return it in the afternoon, meaning to say there's a difference in terms of the time of day that it is returned. B'tarti katani. There's actually two separate halachas listed in this brisa as follows. V'achi katani, and this is what the brisa is actually teaching. Hechzira shachar is l'makom she'irena. If the person returns it, meaning the person who found the lost object, returns it in the morning to a place where the original owner can see it, u'shchiach da'ayil v'nafik v'chazila, and it's normal, it's frequent that this is when the owner comes out and he'll certainly see it. Eino chayav l'tafel, but he doesn't have to deal with it any further. That's considered returning it properly. However, echzira b'tzarayim, if the person returns it in the afternoon, l'makom she'irena, to a place where he would see it. However, the lo shliach da'ayil v'nafik, the lo chazila, it's not a time when he frequently comes out. He's probably not going to see it. So in that situation, v'nignava oavda, in that situation, if it's stolen or if it's lost, chayiv b'achriyusa, he is chayiv, he is responsible. And the Gemara continues, Esvei, we have a question from the following brisa. This is a continuation of the Tosefta above. It says, Liolam hu chayiv, he's always chayiv. It means to say he's responsible for geneva v'aveda, ad sheyachazirena l'rishus, until he returns it to the rishus of the original owner. And so the Gemara says, "My liolam." What does it mean? He's always chayiv in geneva v'aveda. Lav afilu mi beiso. Doesn't it mean even from his own house? Meaning the person who found it, even if it gets stolen or lost from his house, he is responsible. That's what the brisa is saying. And again, it's saying that he's chayiv in geneva v'aveda. Shma mina kashomer sacher dami. Again, it sounds like from this line of the brisa that the shomer aveda is considered like a shomer sacher. And the Gemara says to that, Amar le, he said to him, Modino loch bebalei chayim. I admit to you, when we're talking about animals, we'll understand that this part of the brisa is talking about animals. The kevan denakti lu nigra baraisa, because since already they've shown that they go outside, that they walk on their own to the outside, they leave. Boy netirusa yaserta. So then it needs to have an extra level of shmira, an extra level of watching. And Rashi explains, Modina loch ba'avedas ba'alechayim, when we're talking about a lost object that is a creature, that is an animal, the chayiv hamotzi b'gneva v'aveda, there actually the person who finds it is chayiv in gneva v'aveda. V'lav mishum schar mitzvah, it's not because of the schar mitzvah, it's not because he's considered like a shomer zacher. Ela mishum the gneva v'aveda didhu pshiyusi, because rather the reason is that gneva v'aveda by animals actually is a form of pshia, it's a form of negligence. The kevan denakter nagri baraisa, kevan sharash. That means to say, since we already see this is an animal that gets lost, it leaves. So boy, netirusi yaserta, obviously it needs a higher level of watching. V'afilo have a shomer chinam chayiv, and even if the person has a status of a shomer chinam, that's what Rabba is responding. Even if he was a shomer chinam, he'd be chayiv here when it comes to the animals. Avol shomer aveda metaltali, but for example, if a person would be a shomer aveda of just regular metaltal and regular movable objects, pater migneva v'aveda, could be he is indeed pater from geneva v'aveda. And the Gemara continues, Esvei Rabba Rav Yosef. Now Rabba asks Rav Yosef a question. Again, Rav Yosef is the one that says he's considered like a shomer sacher. The pasuk says, Hashev, it says you return the aveda, ein li ela bebeso, I only know you return it to his house. Leginasu, lechurvasu minayin, how do you know you can return it to his garden or to his ruin? Talmud lomar teshivim, it says Hashev teshivim, it uses a double language. Mikol makom, that means any kind of hashava, any kind of returning is going to be enough. And the Gemara says, "Mai leginasu lechorvaso." Now, what does it mean you're returning it to his garden or his ruin? If you're returning it to the gina that is protected properly, or the chorva that's protected properly, so that would be the same as his house. Of course, you don't need a special inclusion for that. So ela rather pshit, it's obvious. Obviously, it's a garden that's not fully watched. It's a chorva that's not fully watched, meaning to say it's just the level of a shomer chinam. So you see that the shomer aveda is only considered like a shomer chinam. So Amar Lei, so he said back to him, Liolam leginas ha-mishtameres u'lechorvas ha-mishtameres. Really, it means to say you're returning it to the garden that is mishtameres, the chorva that is mishtameres. Now your question was, isn't that identical to his house? Not necessarily. Hakamash malan delo bina das baila. Maybe what it's teaching us over here is that you don't need to have the knowledge of the original owner. Because Rebbe Lazar, like Rebbe Lazar said, the Yam Rebbe Lazar, because Rebbe Lazar said, Hakol tzrichen das bailim, you always require the knowledge of the owner. Chutz me hashavas aveda, except for by hashavas aveda, shari rivsa b'torah hashavas harbi, because the Torah uses that term hashava many times to say any kind of returning is okay. And Rashi explains, Hakol tzrichen das bailam, you always require the das of the bailam, meaning gonei v'gozel o echad me'arba shomrim, somebody steals one of the 4 shomrim, shechzir, if they return it, tzarech lo dio lebailam, you need to let the owner know it was returned. Vim lo dio chayiv ha'machzer b'charus, and if you don't let him know, the person who's trying to return it is still chayiv, he's still responsible, and again, that is not true when it comes to a shomer aveda. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Abaye le Rav Yosef, Abaye said to Rav Yosef, V'yat lo tizbra the shomer aveda k'shomer chinam dami, do you not agree that a shomer aveda is like a shomer chinam? V'yomer Rabbi Barabba, Rabbi Yochanan, but Rabbi Barabba said that Rabbi Yochanan said, Hatoin tainas ganav ba'aveda. If somebody has a claim, he claims it was stolen from him when he's watching over a lost object. Now, there's a halach in general of toin tainas ganav. If a person makes a claim to try to get out of responsibility by saying it was stolen from him, and it turns out he was lying about it, he took a false oath about it, really wasn't stolen, so the halach is he himself becomes like a ganav, and he has to pay kefil. So here it's saying that toin tainas ganav by aveda, Mishalim tashlumei kefil, he has to pay that kefil payment. And so the Gemara now says, Bisal gadaitach shomer sacher hava. Now, if you say that a shomer aveda is a shomer sacher, so that makes no sense, because a shomer sacher, if he says it was stolen, actually already just has to pay. That's not a claim that gets him out of anything. Amay mishalim tashlumei kefil. Why would he have to pay kefil in that case? Karna boy shlumi. He would just pay the keren, because he's essentially admitting that he's responsible. Meaning to say, the idea of toin tainas ganav really only makes sense by a shomer chinam, because the shomer chinam is trying to get out of responsibility by being toin tainas ganav, by claiming that it was stolen from him. If it turns out that he lied about that he took a false oath about that, then he has to pay kefil. That only makes sense in the context of a shomer chinam. So it seems that a shomer aved is a shomer chinam. But the Gemara says not necessarily. Amar Lei said back to him, Hacha b'mayaskin kagon shetoin tainas listim mizuyin. The case over here is that indeed the shomer aveda is a shomer sacher. Why is it that he was trying to exempt himself by saying that it was stolen? He's not simply saying it was stolen. He's saying it was taken by robbers who were armed robbers, and that actually is considered to be an onus. It actually would have gotten them out of it, and list of mizuyin, if it turns out that he's false in claiming this list of mizuyin, he actually would pay kefil. Rashi says, Tainas list of mizuyin, ganav mizuyin means an armed robber, nadal heimenu b'chazaka, took it by force, to kapater nafshi b'tainas onus. There he is exempting himself by making a claim of onus, and again, if it turns out that he's lying about that, he is going to have to pay kefil. The Gemara says, but that's not really true. Amarle said back to him, list of mizuyin, gazlan, who a list of mizuyin is not a ganav, it's a gazlan. That's something right out in the open, and you actually don't pay kefil in that case. As Rashi says, listim mizuin gazlan hu v'tainas onus pater navshe v'kefil b'toin tainas ganavu. It's true that it's a tainas onus and he exempts himself, but kefil is only when you claim ganav, not when you claim gazlan. T'chasa berachmana v'gonav v'beisoyish. It says in the pasuk a language of geneva when it's talking about kefil, and so how can you say there's kefil over here anyways? And so Amar Lei said back to him, Sha'ani Omer, because I say, listim mizuin, that when it comes to an armed robber, kevan de mitmar me'inshi, since they are hiding from other people, ganav, who that person is considered a ganav, and there is a payment of kefil. That's my opinion by listim mizuin. Rashi says, ganav, who is considered a ganav, mishalim kefil, and pays kefil, v'chein ha-poter atzma, v'tainas listim mizuin, the same would be true if a shomer sacher tries to exempt himself with a claim of listim mizuyim, and that claim turns out not to be true. Well, inyan chiyav lo mechayev shomer sacher aleh, im emes asa dahanis. Now, if it was true what the shomer sacher is saying, that there was listim mizuin, he actually would be poter, again, because it's considered to be an onus. And the Gemara continues, Eisve, we have the following question, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Zayin Amud Beis.